Fine. We're going to go ahead and get started. So I just want to give a quick welcome to everybody for joining us along tonight at our seminar about the cladding crisis in Scotland. So my name is Tzana. I work at Watermans Legal. I'm the head of the property sales department. I'm joined today with our panel of speakers. We've got Shawn, who is the head of conveyancing with Watermans Legal. We've got Wallace from M&W Mortgages Limited. We've got Horne, who unfortunately has a name, Ross McNutty. It's definitely not Ross McNutty, but that's Horne, partner at Shepherd Chartered Surveyors here. We're joined by Nelis, who is basically the registered fire risk assessor with the Institution of Fire Engineers, director of Fire Risk Assessment Scotland Limited. That's a mouthful. What I'm going to do very quickly is we will start up our slideshow. We will have essentially, I'm just going to give a quick intro and overview of what tonight will entail. Each one of the guest speakers will have specific topics that they're covering, and we're roughly going to be about 8 to 10 minutes each. And hopefully at the end, we'll have enough time for a Q&A at the end of it. So if you're on to our YouTube link just now and you're watching live, please do feel free to comment in the comment section. We'll pick up... Sorry about that. We'll pick up some of it. I'm just being told there's no sound on YouTube, so 2 seconds while I kind of figure that out real quick. So our YouTube link, see if that works any better. Sorry. Let's see if that goes on. Sorry, guys. While I kind of figure that. Okay, well, let's try it again. Sorry about that. So anyway, we will... Thank you again for joining us tonight, and we will be picking up on how we're going forward. And welcome to the online cladding seminar. Really sorry about that if that's gone a little bit fuzzy there. Again, feel free to sound is on fine. Perfect. Thanks, Matthew, for kind of confirming that. Thank you. We're going to go ahead and get started just now. And like you said, we're looking forward to the end of this roadmap with lockdown finishing up. So we can then host one of these in person. Let's pick up here. Sorry about that, guys. Let's do a screen share. We've got this, and here we go. So essentially what we've been picking up, I just want to welcome everybody here today. We've kind of picked up in terms of that we know that this has been ongoing. We're really just here to talk about very specific issues with the cladding crisis in Scotland, which is really just that we want to help buyers, we want to help sellers, and we want to just be open, honest, and transparent with the information. If anybody does have questions or needs additional information, please reach out to any of us on the panel. We'll have our contact information available for everybody throughout the slides and also at the end of this. And we will also send over an email with everybody who's registered on that we can then send you the PDFs of these slides here. So always feel free to reach out. Contact details are on there, and here we go. So again, we're joined over by Horne, who's a partner at Shepherd. We've got Nelis, who's a director of Fire Risk Assessment Scotland. Myself, I'm Tzana. I'm the head of the property sales at Watermans Legal. We've got Wallace, who's the mortgage advisor and director at M&W Mortgages. And we've got Shawn, who's the head of conveyancing at Watermans Legal. We're really just picking up on an overview of where did it all start? Why, what happened, what led to this? I know the two main experts who probably everybody's here to listen to is Mike and Paul, and also Mark, and they're really going to talk about, Grenfell. Obviously, that tragedy happened in June 2017, and it picked up about combustible materials and how quickly that fire spread, which led to all the tragedy with the lives being lost. What's been realized is the problem is not just ACM cladding, which was present at Grenfell. It's been picked up that it's the entire external wall system. Things that we're going to talk about, and we're being very specific with is the word cladding. It's not just cladding. We're talking cladding for what we're referring to. A lot of this will be shorthand termed to really mean the entire external wall system. I appreciate that's kind of an overreaching term, but it's probably less syllables and it's just a little bit easier to talk about. So that's really where we're picking up there. We know that this is a widespread problem affecting thousands of public and private sector blocks across the UK. We're going to specifically focus here at this seminar with Scotland. So I know that from the registration numbers that we could see, we did have a few people reaching in from out with other parts of the UK. So we welcome you guys here, and we hope that this information is really helpful to share and be open, honest, and transparent with what we know. However, we are specifically talking about north of the border, everything here about Scotland. We'll kind of pick up on a few things, really the possible presence of dangerous cladding, insulation, etc. You know, and the big thing is that if there is combustible materials, it can be very, very costly to make those repairs. Also affecting homeowners are the fact that maybe your block buildings insurance is up for renewal and the prices are skyrocketing. We really are going to try to cover if there's been a decline in demand for some of these style of flats and developments where there's no real clarity about cladding. Or has it just really been an effective lockdown? We have seen, at least throughout certain parts of Scotland, that there has been a surge with people moving out of the city and getting more suburban areas, gardens. That's probably been more of an effect of COVID and people realizing maybe my flat is too small to be stuck in for the last 12 months. And really just many flats, are they seen as unsellable or unmortgageable without evidence with a passing EWS1 form that they're okay? So we'll cover over again the agenda, what we're doing. Mike's going to lead off today talking about cladding, EWS1 forms, and home report surveys. Paul Nelis is going to pick up about cladding and EWS1 forms and explain more of that because that is his specialty. I'll then talk about it from selling your property with cladding and a homeowner's perspective because I personally own a property here in Scotland that is affected by cladding. Then Mark's going to really talk about hints and tips from a mortgage advisor's perspective, and he's really going to give property buyers and homeowners who want to remortgage some real insight into, you know, his part of the business. And then Shawn's going to talk about it more from a conveyancing perspective. What is it that, you know, conveyancers need to be aware of, how he can give confidence to buyers that actually these are still really sound properties to purchase. And then we're going to, just at the end of it, just more for when people want the slides, we've got a list of useful links that you guys can access to. So I will hand over to Mike, and here we go.
Hi there. I'll be speaking to my kids about the Ross McNutty bit. I am Mike Horne, partner at Shepherd Surveyors, and I've been asked to chat about how we got into this situation with cladding. Why is it causing so many issues? Zena mentioned Grenfell. That's obviously how it started in June 2017. The cause of that was deemed to be the ACM cladding. On the back of this, the MHCLG issued a notice in December 2018. This raised concern on buildings over 18 metres that had cladding. This was actually guidance, it wasn't actually legislation. It wasn't really until June 2019 that the first lender reacted to this notice from the MHCLG. That was the nationwide. They deemed that they needed a report stating there was no ACMs in the building. The other lenders were quite slow to react. Some of them were, but soon after, they all basically followed the MHCLG notice. The MHCLG notice said that buildings had to meet BS 8414 and BRE 135 classification. The issue being that no one in Scotland was actually qualified to guarantee that. The MHCLG actually technically had no remit in Scotland at that time. The lenders, though, adopted this 18-metre rule for a building with cladding. The 18-metre rule actually became quite crucial, and in Edinburgh, there's a guy, Colin Wishart at the council, who was inundated with requests to state, is my block over or under 18 metres? And if it was under 18 metres, that was gold dust. That was Santa come early, because if it was over 80 metres, you couldn't technically sell or remortgage. And the lenders, as per lenders' guidelines, it was a zero value. A solution was obviously needed. UK Finance, RICS, Building Society Association devised the EWS1 form. This was published in January 20. As a solution for lending on a building with cladding, there was ratings of A1, A2, A3, B1 and B2. At the end of January 2020, the MHCLG issued a second notice, and this was basically stating they were raising concern on any building of any height with any cladding. Balconies were also thrown into the mix if they had timber decking. That was deemed to be a fire risk as well. In February 2020, the Nationwide, funnily enough, were the first lender to react again, and they changed their guidelines for valuers looking at a building with potentially combustible cladding material. Initially, other lenders again were slow to react, and some were actually stating at that time that they would stick with the 18-meter rule. Eventually, all of them did change, and any building of any height became an issue. Lenders' guidelines are different from lender to lender. We as valuers have to actually follow these. On their forms, it is a zero value until an EWS1 form has been obtained that meets their guidance. Generally, this is A1, A2, or B1. When we carry out home reports, we don't give a zero value, but if there's cladding that's deemed potentially combustible, we have phraseology requesting that an EWS1 form is obtained. In Scotland, it's individual flats the homeowner has to obtain. It's obviously different in England with the leasehold down there. The lenders require the EWS1 form before they will lend. They review the form themselves and they make their decision depending on the rating. RICS did issue previous guidance at that time for buildings that were 3-story and below. They didn't envisage that the requirement for EWS1 form unless there was a specific concern. Majority of the lenders did follow that. An issue we've got at the moment is there's only 3 firms who are able to carry out the EWS1 forms in Scotland, and there's only 3 firms that are acceptable to the lenders. They, as you can imagine, have been very busy. Timescales to get EWS1 forms done can take a bit of time. I mean, this issue has been raised by the Scottish Government, but ultimately it's the lender's decision and who they accept to do the EWS1 forms. Most of you are aware this RSS issued new guidance just last Monday. This is effective from the 5th of April this year. They're saying that you can, start using this guidance from now. It's no longer height; it's now stories. In summary, buildings over 6 stories, if there's any cladding on the building, or if you've got balconies linked to a combustible material. Buildings of 5 to 6 stories, if there's ACM, MCM, or HPL, aluminium composite material, which Grenfell had. MCM, which is metal composite material, and HPL, high pressure laminate. With other types of timber, other types of cladding, sorry, i.e. timber, if it's less than 25%, then you don't need to request an EWS1 form. And again, it's balconies linked to a combustible material. That's the case where if you've got balconies, they can be metal, they can have the timber decking, but if for example, if there's timber cladding running up the building and they're attached to that, then it's an EWS1 form. Buildings of 4 stories or fewer is the last bracket, and that's if there's any ACM, MCM, or HPL. This is RSS guidance. I mean, they did speak to MHCLG and the Institute of Fire Engineers in coming up with this. And if I'm being honest, there's been a mixed response from lenders. Every lender has an agreed framework to which we have to abide. As I said earlier, they've got different guidelines. I know that having spoken to a few of the lenders, they are still digesting what's come out last week. The EWS1 form gives a rating, and as I said, the lenders are generally accepting A1, A2, and B1. This is an extra cost that's been thrown in, but ultimately, if you can get a satisfactory EWS1 form for a lender, you can sell your property, you can remortgage. The issue being that if you get the B2 rating, you can't sell and remediation work is required. Both the UK and the Scottish governments have pledged money to remove the cladding. However, we're still waiting to see what happens. There's no timescales been detailed. Some house builders have also made provisions to remove unsafe cladding. Not all of them yet, but hopefully we're moving forward with that. Taylor Wimpey, the Glasgow Harbour development, they quite early on in the whole process basically said that, yep, we'll sort that out, and the work is ongoing as we speak. The whole situation with cladding, it's been a long and twisting road. I'm sure there'll be more twists to come. Going to the next bit, sort of about the common questions. Sorry.
If you guys hadn't yet figured out, Mike went off rogue and does his, yes. So all of these slides will be emailed through. I'm like trying to catch up. I'm like, which slide are you on? All of these questions will be, all of the slides will be emailed through to everybody as well. And if you didn't register your details, please do get in touch, and we'll be happy to send the slides over. So don't worry. But yes, probably he covered it.
The common questions bit. The homeowner challenge and the need for EWS1 form. Basically, as a surveyor, if we see a material that we deem could be potentially combustible, then the guidelines state that we have to request an EWS1 form. The ISA's guidance that was published last week states that it's actually English leasehold written confirmation that the building owner or managing agent, that there's no ACM, MCM or HPL. If we can get that confirmation, then we wouldn't request an EWS1 form. Scotland's slightly different. We've been having discussions about it this week, whether if we get confirmation from a developer, the original developer, would that be acceptable? Possibly, probably. As I say, that's still being debated. Central portal, I think most firms will have a portal of blocks and what ratings they got. I presume Paul will have it all set up as well. There's no central portal though to state, but what I found that when I've been going around flats with cladding on them, that people know in those flats generally the one down the stairs sold, what rating it got. So people are fairly switched on. There's obviously some developments that there might not have been a sale yet there since, but in terms of portals, there's no central portal, but surveying firms and the firms carrying EWS1 forms will have their own portals. And the last one, I suppose I answered that really already. All of the above, really. Because there's been sales in a block, we'll know what the rating was once the EWS1 form's been obtained. And as I say, if it's an A1, A2 or B1, then the lenders will lend. And the estate agents and the fire safety specialists, they'll have that information to hand as well. And apologies, Tzana, for going off piste there.
You're fine. You did warn me ahead of time. I was like, oh no. But no, the comments are good. Like I said, if you do have questions, people who are in attendance, please do use the chat feature and the function on our YouTube channel, because I'm writing down a couple of questions. I'll pick up versus kind of each section, and we'll ask them at the end for the question and answer. So please do feel free to use the comment section and ask them as they pop into your head or as we're speaking. So it'd be great to kind of hear from you. So thank you very much, Mike. So again, any questions about home report surveys or doing mortgage valuations of your property or any property that you're interested to buy, Mike is your man. Ginny Shepherd, they actually have offices all over Scotland. Do you want to mention anything? Do you cover, is there any areas that you don't cover, Mike? Or you guys?
Right, I'd muted myself there. No, we've got 32 offices around Scotland now. So basically, any part of Scotland we cover. We've got it from Inverness to Dumfries to Gala, Aberdeen. Yeah, so we have full coverage.
Cool. Excellent. All right, thank you guys. Thank you very much. Okay, on to the next one, and we're going to go into speaking with Paul. I'm going to. Are you okay? You ready to go, Paul?
Thanks, Tzana. Yeah.
You take it away whenever you are.
Okay. Okay, the stats on the screen are from the UK government, well, the first part anyway. About 58,000 properties in the UK require an EWS1. That was a stat that was there before the guidelines changed, and by that I mean MHCLG advice that came out on the 20th of January 2020, that, as Mike said that really building owners should be aware of the external walls and how they're constructed on buildings of any height. Prior to that date, it was specifically buildings higher than 18 metres. There's a few reasons why that change was there. The main one being that the UK government became aware of several buildings in England that were just under 18 metres, 17.5, 17.8 metres. Some of them were student accommodation for universities that were wrapped in ACM, exactly the same type as Grenfell, but the building owners were refusing to do anything about that because the guidelines were saying 18 metres. So the UK government felt they had no option other than to include information that it should be buildings of any height. But I don't think they anticipated, and I've been advised that they didn't anticipate that that would regulate its way down to concerns of buildings over 2 metres. So in the world of risk assessment, surveying, etc., there is a huge difference between professionals working in city centres and their consideration of risk than what there is, for example, in Fort William. So we've been requested to get and look at buildings that are 2 stories, ex-local authority homes that have been wrapped in insulation for environmental purposes, and I don't think that was the intent of that guidance. So ACM, and get back onto the slides, the cladding crisis is not just about ACM. Builders are continually looking for new products that are lightweight, cheaper, and that they can construct buildings quicker as time goes on. And quite a lot of that background went into the Grenfell fire. Other types of cladding on buildings can be, well, HPL has been mentioned before, high pressure laminates, which is essentially either wood chips or wood dust or paper dust with a resin and then compacted under pressure with heat. Timber cladding of various kinds and various timbers have got different charring rates. They burn at different temperatures, they char at different rates, etc. Laminated glass systems, normally wall screen systems. The little diagram on the left-hand side, it shows concrete with insulation and cladding. And dependent on what that insulation is and dependent on what type of cladding is, that wall can either be completely safe and fire resistant or not so. Or if parts of it are different, that can make a difference. Within the middle section, it's showing some rain screen cladding designed to keep most of the rain out. Behind that would be normally a small cavity and then some insulation and then the main building substrate, which would normally be concrete. The diagram on the right is just showing you a breakdown of a wall with timber, brick substrate with timber frame and then timber panels on it. Okay, so the Grenfell Tower fire, to most of the people joining this, it would have been a one-off. However, it wasn't a one-off fire. There's been several fires in multi-storey buildings in Asia and Australia that were wrapped in ACM cladding. None of them resulted in the number of fatalities that were on Grenfell. You can see as time progressed and very, very quickly, at an inquiry in Australia, a professor calculated that 1 square metre of ACM with the type of insulation that was behind it was equivalent to 5 litres of petrol. So the polyethylene core within the ACM panels, they call it solid petrol, when exposed to fire, he reckoned that on the top of the building on the left hand side, that there may have been the equivalent of 3 or 4 petrol tankers with the main valves open, pouring petrol down the side of it. So a colossal fuel load. And considering that was a refurbishment of an original building that was made of concrete, the effect is quite dramatic. Okay, this is just showing you through a timescale of the Grenfell fire, which I really don't want to focus on here, because I know it's more about EWS1. Okay, Grenfell was clad in ACM, but it also had Celotex foam, a product called RS5000 that's highly combustible. Thanks, Tzana. Okay, and these photographs are just showing you some examples of different types of wall systems. Okay, EWS1 form developed over an approximately 6-month period between the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, known as RICS, and UK Finance, which is the overarching body that represents effectively banks in the UK, and the British Building Societies Association, apologies. It was launched on the 16th December 2019 and designed to be a simple system for lenders where they could make a decision that was more of a financial tool, whether they could lend or not. And the background to that is that after Grenfell, and mainly down south, they discovered that there were several buildings, lots of buildings wrapped in ACM. The remediation costs for some people were up to £50,000 or more. Some people reneged on their mortgages, the banks repossessed, and the banks were left with an owner's share of remediation costs. So the ACM, the EWS1 form was developed as a financial risk tool, if you like, before lending. Thanks, Anna. Okay, some notes on the EWS forum, and these give some sort of outline of maybe who should be filling out the forms for option A on the form or option B on the form. The risk assessor, and looking at an EWS1 form, there's a flowchart on it as well. Essentially, for an EWS1 inspection, there are two main types. One is a visual inspection or a non-intrusive inspection that would be non-destructive. So normally, unless the inspection has been commissioned by the factor in Scotland or the building owner in England, fire risk assessors or surveyors would not have permission and not have a legal duty or authority to remove panels, drill holes in buildings, etc. Because in Scotland, the common parts of the building belong collectively to the common owners of that building. So most EWS1 inspections are visual, and it would only be where the assessor has got concerns over the external leaf materials, if you like, that there would be a need to find out exactly by a more destructive means, removing panels, drilling holes, etc., of what's behind them. So, for example, a building that's built of concrete and stone with, for example, seam zinc panels on the top, where a fire wouldn't spread through or across it, would not need holes to be drilled in the brick or concrete so that the assessor can look to see if there's cavity barriers or fire breaks, etc. Okay, so the ratings explained. Essentially, A1, the A rating, there's A1, A2 and A3. A1 and A2 are being accepted by lenders. B1 is being accepted by lenders. However, on 3rd of December 2020, most UK lenders have decided that to accept an EWS1 with a B score on it, either B1 or B2, that the signatory should be a chartered fire engineer with the Institution of Fire Engineers and specifically have the post-nominals C Eng. There is a list on the IFE website that anyone can go and have a look at, and there's approximately 85 chartered engineers for the whole of the UK. So the actual scores themselves, A1 effectively means the building is bulletproof. So there's no combustibles in the main walls, and there's no combustible attachments, for example, timber on balconies or verandas. A2 is an indication that there's combustibles on attachments, so not the main walls, but the attachments. So that could be timber on verandas at the back of a building. It could be timber deck or composite deck flooring on balconies, or it could be some other kind of decorative or architectural features that are there really for the design of the building. A3 is an indication that there are combustibles on the attachments on the building, but the remediation work was required, and that would mainly apply where there's timber deck on balconies or timber balconies that are stacked above each other. But there's a lot of things to consider for a fire risk assessor in there when it comes to the timber, and that would be the quantity of timber, the design of the building, where the timber and how a fire would spread, etc., etc. So B1 is an indication that there's combustible materials in the main walls, but they think the risk is so low that no remediation works are required. B2 is an indication that an adequate standard of safety is not required. We are aware that, and I'll give you some examples of a B2. An example of a B2 would be a building development as there is in the west of Scotland. It's 14 floors high, and it's got polystyrene walls from ground floor to the top floor. It really should, on top of the polystyrene is a very, very thin layer of acrylic render. So if there was a fire in that building at probably any floor, then it's likely to spread via the polystyrene. That would be a B2 and need remediation. Okay, these are helpful tips, not from my perspective, but probably from this perspective of someone who's actually checking the EWS1, maybe a solicitor or a surveyor or a lender. I'm quite often asked, we are quite often asked, do I need an EWS1 or do I not need an EWS1? And the main answer from us is that we provide these EWS1 services, and we'll advise clients, if your lender or the surveyor makes comment in a home report, or if it's a purchaser solicitor giving them the best advice that they should get an EWS1, it would be normally those three professionals that make the decision as to an EWS1 being required or not. Thanks, Anna. Okay, so new RICS guidance comes in on the 5th of April 2021. RICS have actually advocated that the new guidance should be implemented with immediate effect, but companies will have some policies and procedures to change, so it may not be as immediate as they would like. So the cost of an EWS1 form, it really depends on the company who are doing it, and company costs, for example. So fees can typically start from just over £500 plus VAT for a property, and in Scotland that would be from a homeowner, because it's freehold properties, whereas in England it would be one building owner who owns the whole property under the leasehold type housing tenure, and up to £3,500 plus VAT per property, and that is in Scotland, and that's just a different company who provides those services. Okay, challenges specifically within not only Scotland but the UK is that there are approximately 85 CEng qualified engineers registered with the IFE for the whole of the UK. There is a list of registered fire risk assessors on the Fire Sector Federation's website. It's a full list of registered fire risk assessors that's been developed. That has been created within the last couple of weeks as a result of the Dame Judith Hackett report and the ongoing work in England about regarding competency. Okay. And I'd be delighted if anyone's got any questions. It's been a very short 10-minute session. We couldn't possibly discuss everything that might come up, so it's been a general overview, but I would be delighted to answer any questions that you have. Thanks, Anna.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Paul. That's been great. I've been able to, like I said, people, please do, if you're watching along with us, keep your comments coming and keep your questions coming, because I'm writing down some of the big ones that I'm seeing that are kind of common questions that everybody's asking, transcribing all of the questions over onto emails over to the rest of the panel speakers, and can be sending them out. And again, we'll update this on our Facebook page as well. So if you don't already, you can like and follow the Watermans Legal Facebook page. And again, we'll update the notes, provide some helpful information after the speech and the seminar tonight. And hopefully this will be, again, like I said, we're just bringing clarity and transparency into the industry and what's going on at the moment. What I'm going to be speaking about today, again, I'm Tzana, and I'm the head of the property sales at Watermans Legal, is I'm going to be talking about it from two perspectives, both from how a homeowner who, again, owns a property that has cladding or is identified as requiring an EWS1 form, how you can sell the property, really how you can choose the right agent, and asking questions, and really how you can use the resources that we have to give you more information and more knowledge. But I'm also going to talk about it from the perspective of a homeowner who actually owns a property with cladding that is affected by this situation. So I kind of am coming at it from both perspectives, and also to give you a bit more information about what I did and with past information along to the residents committee in my development, and how we've been successful in kind of coming in there and really just trying to make some headway and being proactive with this scenario. So first of all, it's really just titled a practical way to get moving with a cladding crisis. We're really just saying that, again, being completely honest, there's really no easy way to get around this. It's very likely to take a number of years until a solution is found for everyone. Right now, our main purpose of our cladding seminar, again, is to provide open, honest, and transparent information and advice on how homeowners who want to move or need to move can do so. We're not going to have the exact answers to fit everyone's circumstances, and I think this is really important to kind of mention. And for those of you who still at the end of this seminar do have questions that maybe we haven't covered, please do get in touch with us. Again, get in touch with Shawn or myself at Watermans Legal. You can contact us or get in touch with any of the panel of speakers today, and they would be happy to help. The truth of the matter, again, is many properties with cladding, there are throughout the entire UK, and again, specifically in Scotland, that do require an EWS1 form, but they are still achieving successful sales. And I think that that's the biggest thing that I want to talk about, is actually combating the kind of clickbait or the sensationalist headlines, which says that properties are unsellable, unmortgageable. That's simply not true. There are many who are having this issue, and especially as the requirements are evolving. But at the same time, you know, we are seeing every day with all of us, every one of us who are on this panel, we're seeing successful sales go through at strong prices all throughout Scotland. And I think that that's something that I want to really be promoting and being proactive with. There is a cloud of mystery surrounding this topic. Many people want to bury their head in the sand. Many agents are shying away from it. And a lot of that is because this situation is constantly evolving, as you've heard from probably the two most knowledgeable people on this seminar about EWS1 forms and the fire risk assessment and the cladding scenario. Is this is constantly changing. But I think it's important to remember that the lenders in UK finance are driving this ship. They are steering the ship. And in all actuality, if we rely on a buyer to get a mortgage to purchase our property, if we're looking to sell, you know, we need to kind of figure out what is it they want and how do we do it. Yes, we will work around, find a working solution that fits everybody. But at the same time, if you do want to move, we are here to tell you how you can do it. My own personal experience of owning a property in Scotland with cladding. I'm the owner of a high-rise building. It's affected here in Edinburgh. It's my family home. I'm not quite looking to remortgage yet or to sell. And I found out about my home, my biggest financial asset, being affected at the exact same time that everybody else did at the end of 2019. So that was a bit of a surprise. I found out because I was trying to sell a property in my development for one of my neighbors, and the surveyor walked in and said, by the way, that's a category 3 for main walls and there's a nil value. So that was a bit of a shocker, really just for me to try to digest it, to figure it out. And the first thing I did immediately was call the owner, but I also phoned our residents association, or got in touch with them there, our panel and our committee. And I also got in touch with our factor, really just making them aware, you know, what is it we can do? And like many, I think, who are watching at the moment, who are affected by this as homeowners, you quickly learned that your factor does not want to get involved. I appreciate it, and I understood it, and I didn't agree with it, but at the same time, I understand what their remit is, and our factors are there to act on behalf of the homeowners. They're not there to act for us. And I think that was a big thing where I had to learn. And in order for us to get action and to make a difference, we had to get together as a collective and a collective voice, and we had to get moving. So there's definitely something that I will be picking up on that later to give any sort of recommendations or tips and hints, but really just to make you guys aware exactly what the purpose of a managing agent or a factor is. Again, in terms of the current status of what's going on with my development, our residents association, they are wonderful. And as a result of all of their hard work and me being involved with them to pass them information and to try to help drive this forward, I've now joined my residents association. So I'm sure they're looking forward to the further meetings that I'll be having with them later. But again, we're picking up, we were just making sure that they worked hard to ensure that they were kept informed. We were in constant communication. They did a lot of the research as well. I simply, working within the industry, I passed them information, and they went off and did it, and were absolutely amazing. To give you a timeline on what our development did in November 2019, again, it had been just a couple of months that this was realized, and I had knowledge of it and passed it along to them. Our residents association had a committee meeting, and we were able to get the majority of owners' approval and for our committee to act on our behalf. By January 2020, our residents association had already spoken with 3 specialists, and they've met with 2, and we're talking about getting an entire survey assessment for our entire block. By March 2020, our development had surveys carried out for each block. And each homeowner was then therefore able to obtain an EWS1 form in their name. And I mentioned at a discounted price. It is not that we were, they were offering a special service, but we had a general maintenance fund that were able to cover the majority of that cost on behalf of all of the homeowners. So this all benefited everyone. And at the end of the day, it has worked. I will have additional information about some of the sales statistics within my development, as well as another development here in Edinburgh. And again, I'm just picking up that it's not all doom and gloom. And I think that that's something important to pass along. Properties in my development are now successfully selling. They're selling for strong prices. For example, a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom flat that sold in 2019 achieved a sale price at $242 from a home report at $240. So again, only slightly above home report valuation, but still strong figures. That same sized 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, it wasn't the exact same property, but a very similar one, just sold in January 2021 after being on the market in October 2020, sold at $270, just over $270 from a home report at $250, and that's an 8% above home report value. I mean, essentially, this means when you're boiling it down that our development has seen over the last kind of 2-year period or year and a half, 18 months, we've seen an 11% increase for our values for these style of properties compared to your kind of Edinburgh average, which would normally be approximately 10% within the last 2 years. I'm giving these approximation on valuation figures or the percentage above home report, and pretends to have a kind of 6% year-on-year increase in some areas. But really, because of the lockdown and the global pandemic, you were seeing last year kind of tail back a little bit, despite I'm sure what Shawn and the rest of the conveyancers who are probably attending will say it has been absolute manic and mayhem from this massive surge of buyer and seller interest. But again, you're kind of seeing those figures, and I think that those are strong and it's something positive to report. Finally, finding a practical way to get moving. If you're a homeowner who wants to sell your property or wants to remortgage or even to release equity now or in the foreseeable future, my best advice and my best recommendation is you have to take action. I think a lot of people thought at first, let's just do a wait and see approach. Let's wait and see what the Scottish government's going to do. Let's wait and see what the rest of the residents are going to do. Let's wait and see if these buildings or these properties are going to be selling. All I can say is the wait and see isn't working or hasn't worked. And I think a lot of that can be said for people who are now in that situation that they want to sell and they were in those developments who did the wait and see. And I think that it is important to kind of group together. What you can do, you can coordinate with other homeowners to start the conversation and start the research. I think the factors may be limited again in what they can do for you or what they can do on your behalf. But if you do give them instructions, they can act on your behalf. Have a proactive committee or a proactive residents association who can and will give instructions to the management agencies on behalf of all owners. That's key, absolutely key. Also key, communication. Get in touch with your factors, have a chat with them, get to know them, have this conversation. It's whoever shouts the loudest obviously gets dealt with first. And I think that those are really important things to remember. Get in touch with your residents association. Maybe you volunteer and act on behalf of them, get joined up, get speaking with them and communicate with other homeowners. This is a massive thing. How are the homeowners speaking to one another? Do you guys have a Facebook group set up for the development? Can you arrange a WhatsApp text group or can you even set up meetings? Obviously virtually just now, but hopefully as we're heading on the way for the next couple of months, you can potentially even meet up together. You can do video calls, you can do conference calls, even email groups, but get speaking to one another and find out information and also do your own research. This is a really, really big one as well. There's been tons of Facebook groups that have been set up that are specifically talking about cladding, and they've been set up by homeowners who want to share information with one another. So go get involved in those, find out, you can do searches on them. There's cladding groups for all over the UK, but specifically there's ones for Scotland. Some of the common questions I'm being sent or being discussed with other homeowners when I'm speaking to them about valuing their property or selling their property is many of them are confused about, do they need to have 100% of owner's approval or owner's instructions to go ahead, or do you just need a majority? To enact changes or some progress within your development, again, do you need 100% approval from homeowners, or can you act on the majority? Check your title deeds. That's the best thing to do. Check your title deeds, check with the residents association, check with the factors, get in touch with them and get informed. That's the biggest thing. Your title deeds, again, are going to be registered with the Land Registry of Scotland. You can, if you don't have your title deeds or you don't want to get in touch with them, you can contact your solicitor. Your lender may have them, but again, it is a website that you could go on to. There is a small fee for you to pay to download your title deeds. Get in touch with them and find that information out. I think there's big things that are needing to be differentiated in terms of what is maintenance versus what are improvements. A homeowner is solely responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of their own property, but then parts of, again, tenement, I appreciate it's normally associated with the word traditional tenement for older style buildings, but at the same time, the word tenement also means modern blocks or blocks of flats. The parts of the building or your block of flats, which are the responsibility of all owners, are areas that are jointly or commonly used. This would be the stairwell, this would be the lifts, this would be the roof, or areas the roof, and this would also be your external wall system. So, you know, if there are remedial works or there are works that are required to be repaired because of the maintenance, these are things that you need to be picking up with your factors and your residents association to say, if something's been picked up in an EWS1 form that mentions we are B2 rating, we are an A3 rating, we're a B1 rating, do we need to look at this in so much as to talk about, you know, should we get this investigated further? Do we need majority owner's approval, or do we need 100%? So get talking about them. Again, I'm just picking up again what maintenance is versus what improvements are, because those are big ones where some, again, I'm just picking up on what some of the people had said when they were sending in questions before, mentioned some factors, had said, well, you know, by investigating this, that would just be home improvements versus being maintenance. So it's just picking up about maintenance means repairs and replacements and so forth. It doesn't mean alterations to your property or to the outside of the building or demolition or making improvements. So again, speak with your factors, speak with your residents association, and what's constituted as being urgent. Okay, so now we're going to get into the nitty gritty. If you're a homeowner and you want to look at selling, the best thing to do that I can give you advice is choose an agent that has experience with this, is knowledgeable, and isn't afraid to talk about it. And I think that that's something that's really important. Ask the agent how active they are in learning about this and being involved in the cladding situation, because it is ever evolving. Are they training their sales team? And this is a big one that I think a lot of people miss out on. Are they training their sales team and their property sales negotiators about cladding? So many times when solicitors phone up to ask about the EWS1 form, to ask about what the rating is, or to ask about even buyers, would I be able to get a mortgage for this? Is this mortgageable? You know, will there be issues? These are things that should be picked up, and these are things that firms should be doing to ensure that they're giving the best service not only to the seller, but also to the buyer, and really, you know, kind of enacting on the news that we have and the information that we have. So these are big things to consider when you guys, homeowners, are choosing an agent. Knowledgeable agents will not only be able to give homeowners best advice, but they'll also be able to have the confidence in when speaking to buyers and sellers. So there's nothing worse than hearing from an agent, oh, I don't know, like, let me go back and just check. Very likely that buyer may just be like, no, do you know what, just forget it, I'll go find something else. Have them be able to answer those questions straight away and to give that information, especially about the cladding scenario. I've done just a quick kind of screen grab, and it's really just describing what a homeowner can do if you guys do want to sell or want to look into your options. First and foremost, book a free pre-sale valuation. These are free. There is no obligation, and it is really just a conversation. It's a chance for us to get to meet you, you to get to meet us, realize, are we the right firm for you? We can do it virtually. We can do it in person. You know, we can do it 7 days a week, really just whenever it suits you. So just book it, whether it's with us or another agent. Like, you know, we would love to deal with it, but these are big things that I think is important, is reach out, take that step, and, you know, we can tell you a bunch of information. We'll do research for you. We will speak to other agents. We will speak to our specialist. I've had many times where I've had to call Mike or the guys at Johnny Shepherd to say, hey there, listen, I've been out to this one. I can't see that any sales have taken place since 2019, since, you know, EWS1 forms were starting to be mentioned in home reports. I've called Paul a couple times. I've called other specialists a few times in terms of the cladding. Do you think this would pass? Have you been out there? Have you done an EWS1 form for a mortgage or a remortgage? These are all really important things. And again, we can provide this information to you. If you want to go on the market and you decide to go ahead and use us, again, we organize for the marketing appointments, which is for the home report surveyor. So Mike would come out, visit the property, prepare the home report survey, and we'd also get a photographer. It's really at this time that we would strongly recommend that we get the EWS1 form carried out, at least instructed. And the reason I say this, it's so important, is that we want to ensure there's no delays. Also, dealing with the other side of it, when a solicitor is acting on behalf of a buyer, they want to know that this information is there so that they're not wasting their time, the buyer's not wasting their time, and the mortgage advisor isn't wasting their time. They'll know, is this property suitable for a mortgage? Would it pass? Would the lender be accepting of it? So it's always best practice to go ahead and just get that done first and foremost. For property viewings, again, once live in the open market, you would have the viewings and then you've got an offer agreed and Bob's your uncle, there you go. So we've got our details on there. If anybody has any questions or wants to do evaluation, we'll always have to have a chat. This is a big one, and I know the guys have already touched on it. With the new RICS guidance coming out on the 5th of April, 2021, will you still need an EWS1 form if your property falls into that category that it's probably no longer going to be required? I would probably say watch this space. It's probably the best thing I'm going to be able to kind of comment on. Again, Paul's picked up on it, and so has Mike, that there will absolutely be an embedding period, a gray area of, are people accepting this? Are lenders accepting this? Are they used to this? Do they feel comfortable with this? How are things kind of going? So in all actuality, I mean, the short story is the lenders are driving this. So again, if they say jump, we kind of have to say how high if the client wants to sell the property. And I think that that's the ultimate situation. If you don't need to sell, or if you don't need to remortgage and you're happy in your home, then those are the wait and see approaches. But if you do need to sell, then, you know, we've just got to be open-minded and flexible with it. So in the challenges about it, from a homeowner's perspective, many challenges that can occur in order to allow you to progress or to see some sort of movement with your plans is there can be disagreement with other homeowners or the residents association, or even factors on the appropriate plan of action when dealing with a cladding crisis. Again, I've mentioned for the wait and see, I won't even kind of pick up on it. I know it was mentioned over there that builders who are still trading, that's a big one as well. My builders were not still trading, so we didn't even have that as a fallback action. But if the builders are still trading, do you want to wait for them? Again, I think when bureaucracy is involved, it's just, you have to wait a long time. So it really depends on what your urgency is. Again, the factor can seem unhelpful or not wanting to get involved, but remember, they only act on behalf of the owners when you give them instructions, so they just aren't going to do it. The guys have already picked up on it, and I think that we can't stress that enough. There is such a low number of qualified specialists who can prepare the EWS1 forms. They are inundated. Sometimes we're waiting 2 or 3 weeks to get the forms. The guys are great and they're really fantastic and they're always happy to help, but there's only so much that they can do in a working day. So it's just being patient with that. And again, the evolving requirements. I think that, gosh, it feels like it changes on a day-to-day basis, trying to stay on top of it. And many times, little communication isn't always so great, because when there are changes, very rarely is this, well, I don't ever think it's ever just openly kind of sent in an email newsletter or an email blast. Many times we find out about these changes at the time when the buyer's mortgage falls through, or the sale falls through, or at the last minute, and we're just scrambling at that point. So it's hard to get clarity on a lot of the changes and to communicate that. It would be amazing if there would be more direct communication from the lenders, but at the same time, we appreciate they're busy as well. And last year has just been super hard. This is again, picking up in terms of statistics. Have the property prices, have they been negatively affected because of the cladding crisis? I appreciate that we've got people from all over Scotland and again, all over the UK who are joined in today. I'm specifically picking up, because I own a property in Edinburgh, I'm specifically picking up on those two, because again, I just dealt with a sale as well in one. Whilst we operate all over Scotland, again, we've just picked up 2 developments here in Edinburgh. We have a city centre development that does require an EWS1 form. I think I wanted to show some differences in terms of different time periods. This is a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 3rd floor flat within a 7-story block. It was first listed for sale in 2019. It didn't complete until March 2021. I think a lot of that sale had fallen through and came back on again. But it achieved a sale price in March 2021 at 10% above its home report value. I think that's phenomenal, especially given the amount of time on market. There's another one in the same development, 2-bed, 2-bath. It's an 8-floor flat in a 9-story block. Again, achieving 15% above value, completing in December last year in 2020. And there was another 1st-floor flat that achieved 14% above its value and completed in November. So these are all really strong prices. And again, flats, city center. And this is, it could have been as a result of phase 2 opening up, and there was a massive rush of people just sick of their 4 walls and they just wanted to get out and find a new home. But at the same time, this obviously shows that requiring an EWS1 form has not been negative. A good tip that I always find is really interesting is many agents are now including in their marketing text, this property has a clear EWS1 certificate in place. I think that flags up. It means that, I think it's a good tagline for interested buyers, and it gives a little bit more comfort and confidence. Again, there's another development in the north side of Edinburgh. At the end of 2019, early 2020, we saw property sale prices in this development achieving either at home report or just slightly above it, and they took a number of months to complete. By the end of 2020, after phase 2 opened in Scotland, properties in this development were selling quickly, and the last 3 sales completed achieved above home report values at prices between 6 and 8%. Within this same development, again, I'm picking up from really in 2018 all the way to really about September 2019 when this became more prevalent. There was 22 sales that were completed. 3 of those property listings withdrew from the open market. 2 withdrew in November 2019 and 1 in February 2020. From there, though, the sales that were completed kind of pre-EWS1 forms being mentioned on the home report, they were achieved between 4 and 8% above value. In 2020, the first 2 sales completed in October. So those were properties who had been on the market in 2020, and it took an average of 10 months. Average of 9 months. So 9 to 10 months it took to sell. We're also looking at, from the ones who listed in October 2020 to 2021, we're seeing 9 sales have completed since then. And I think that's phenomenal. We're having between 1 and 10% above value. Those are really strong figures. And I think that this is something to give homeowners confidence of. Again, my overview, because I'm just about finished here, is it's knowledge, it's communication, and it's choosing an agent that has experience. And I can't stress that enough. Also, don't believe all the sensationalist headlines. So, property sales are still happening. It is still possible. There's a lot of hard work and there's a lot of paperwork that is involved in it, but really we're always happy to help. So please do feel free to get in touch. That will be me finishing. We are going to be, again, going over to Mark. So I will pass you on over there.
Thanks, Tzana. Hi there, I'm Mark Wallace, mortgage advisor at MW Mortgages Limited. I know a lot of the guys, obviously more experts on here than me. Paul and Mike have obviously gone over in a great detail about the cladding, but it's more just to give a bit more of an overview and an individual lender's perspective as well. So as Paul already pointed out, there's about, I think, 58,000 properties across the UK that are going to be affected by EWS1 forms, and obviously the lack of qualified fire safety experts, presents a huge issue for trying to get these done. The form is obviously originally in place for properties at over 6 stories with dangerous flammable cladding. However, government extended this advice to smaller properties, which then really, mortgage lenders are so risk averse most of the time anyway. They kind of said, well, okay, we're just going to need these sort of properties for whatever height, if the surveyor raises concerns on the home report. It is hoped that the latest version of the form would almost sort of standardize the process. But as I'll point out later on, lenders still have different views on the forms as to what qualifications they'll accept, etc. So it's not become a standardized process at all. So, and again, it's where does the buck fall? So, the housing association management companies, they won't agree on getting a form done on any building. So then ultimately it falls on the seller or the person that already owns the property to get a form undertaken. Now this can obviously be quite costly and it can take a bit of time. So there's not really been anything resolved as we sit at the moment. Just sort of moving on, the EWS1 form ensures that evaluation can be provided for mortgage purposes, essentially. I will point out that the lenders are always guided by the valuer's comments as to whether the property is mortgageable, to do with the future saleability. So if the surveyor raises a concern with the property, the lender will obviously act on that. And I actually think a lot of the time the guidance that's coming out is actually putting a lot of pressure on surveyors. They basically just they'll go by surveyors' comments. They go by surveyors' comments if it's lending above commercial, on certain construction types. So again, cladding is just another one that they will, that they will go in the surveyor's comments and act upon that. Yeah, again, sourcing your own EWS1 form in Scotland. I've actually had a client this week that had an offer accepted on a property, and the seller hadn't actually, got an EWS1 form done, even though the home report said, look, there's potential cladding here. So again, it's who does the onus, who does this fall upon? Is it should a property be marketed without one if the home report specifically says, well, look, it needs one? Or should it be the buyer that needs to get one if someone's buying a property? It's, again, whose responsibility is that? Yeah, as I said before, the guided by the surveyor's comments. There is one lender though that won't actually accept EWS1 forms at all, and obviously they're a main high street lender, Santander. So quite a big lender within the UK, certainly within the top 5 or 6 lenders. They will actually ask from a letter from the building owner management company to confirm, that works have been undertaken by a fire safety expert. That places a huge amount of pressure on the management companies. They aren't willing to sort of, I would have thought the majority of the time, certainly in my experience, sort of put that in writing. So that basically rules Santander out of lending. Now, it can work 2 ways. If the management company is willing to put their name to that, then absolutely you can get a mortgage. There's no need for an EWS1 form. However, the other side is that if an EWS1 form has been completed, they just won't accept it. So it's almost, for one of the big 5 or 6 lenders within the UK to come out and say that, it sort of puts me more in mind that there should be a more standardized process with this. Absolutely. So I know we've been through this, the ratings explained. I won't dwell too much on this, but the category A sign off, essentially there's a wide range of qualification people that can sign that off. Surveyors, civil engineer qualifications, architectural qualifications. So it's absolutely fine, and that's acceptable to all lenders pretty much. If it's a B1, it has to be a fire safety expert. So again, the lack of qualifications, the lack of qualified people to do that presents a problem. And I suppose, how does someone, when they're getting an EWS1 form done, how are they meant to know whether it's going to be an A1, an A2, or a B1? So again, it kind of presents that issue. If someone gets a B1 done, goes to the cost of getting that done, and then suddenly the lender doesn't accept it, it's back to the drawing board. So again, there's a lot of work that needs done in that regard. We've already spoken about the sort of A3 or B2. Obviously, the A3 suggests that more assessments required. So the lenders won't lend if it's an A3, or certainly a B2 is a straight decline. So there's absolutely no way of getting a mortgage with a B2 rating. Some advice, yeah. So I mean, you should really, if you're interested in a property, and it's a newish built flat, then absolutely there should probably be an EWS1 form available with the home report in Scotland. If there's not, then and the surveyor has made comments to say that it does need further inspection, I would be then putting going back to the seller and saying, look, how are we going to get this done? Check the qualifications. So again, if it's an A1, an A2, and if it's done by anyone really, with one of the required qualifications, it'll be fine. If it's a B1, then obviously it's a fire safety expert. So again, it's just worth checking that out with with a mortgage advisor or indeed your bank. A lot of people will still go to their banks for mortgages, which is absolutely fine. But a bank or building society is only one view. A mortgage advisor will generally assess all your options from a wide range of lenders. So I would always say try and get professional advice where possible.
Oh, sorry.
It's fine. So regarding so what can a mortgage advisor do to help buyers remortgaging? So the product transfer, I think we're on the next. So the product transfer options, we talk about mortgage prisoners. Now, just to give you an idea, a mortgage prisoner is someone who already has a mortgage, but is basically at the mercy of that provider. They can't move for whatever reason. And cladding is something which could create that problem. Someone's perhaps bought a property in 2015, 2016, say absolutely no issues at all with lending. They've got it through a high street lender. They then, may want to remortgage now or last year and find that they can't go anywhere. So they're essentially stuck with the one provider. Product transfer options are always available through any lender, but they might not be the best deals in the market. So again, there is that there's that sense that you essentially can't take advantage of perhaps the best deals in the market. But what if you also want to raise money for home improvements, or you want to raise money for a deposit on a property, another buy-to-let property perhaps, or another property? It just means that you're kind of stuck. And obviously that means it's, the introduction of the EWS1 form has made it unfair for those people. So yeah, it definitely restricts the scope for what you can, what you can and can't do. Absolutely. So just moving on to the mortgage process. Yeah, if you have an offer accepted on a property, the home reporting system in Scotland is great. Everyone's got access to it. It will tell you whether the property is acceptable for lending purposes at the start, or whether an EWS1 form is required. Once you've identified if spoken to an advisor, spoken to your bank, and they think that the lender's going to accept it, then fine, you submit it to the lender, and generally there's never any issues with EWS1 forms that are obviously suitably signed off. And you'll obviously then get a mortgage offer. If there is a pushback, if it's an A3, a B1 signed by someone who's not qualified, or a B2, then it'll slow down the process. B2 is just going to be declined. B1 signed off by the wrong person is going to be declined. A3 is going to delay the process. So just find out exactly what the rating is before you even sort of undertake anything with regards to going down the mortgage process. Absolutely. So yeah, once you've had enough, been touched on this already. The lender will always go by the surveyor's comments. I can't stress that enough. It is putting the surveyors in a perilous position with regards to, saying, well, should they be commenting on? And I think as we go on to, I was talking the last bit about the new directive. I know there's going to be, they're going to try and put more onus on the surveyors to make the process a bit more streamlined. But there's a safety issue at hand here, and can we just, can they comment on that, or can't they? And I'm not too sure how much clarity we're going to get through this directive, or are the lenders just going to push back? Are they just going to go, no, we were still on the EWS1 form, signed off by suitable experts? So there is a bit of a dilemma, and we don't know how this year is going to pan out. This has been an issue for a few years now, and it's not gone away. Has it got any better? Probably not. Everyone thought the introduction of the EWS1 form was going to solve all the problems. As I've pointed out, the majority of lenders are fine with that, but one major high street lender is not. So we do need to create a more streamlined process for buyers, for sellers, and indeed for people that want to remortgage. Again, I go back to the point is who the responsibility of the EWS1 from the start. Is that a selling issue? Should the seller be obliged to get that done at the outset once the home report's been carried out and factor that into their costs, or should it be up to the buyer to sort of take that cost in the chin? I did hear today with an offer that was accepted on a property that the estate agent stroke solicitor told them that they should be hoping for offers over to cover the cost of an EWS1 form, which I thought was slightly bizarre, and perhaps not the right practice. But who am I to well, to say whether that's right or wrong? But yeah, so really, that from my perspective, I would say always, loyalty to a bank's great, but a bank or building society only gives you one option. So do explore all your options. Best way to do that is through through a whole of market mortgage broker, and obviously with the new directive coming out, 2021, we'll watch this space and see what happens.
Oh, thanks so much, Mark. That was fantastic. Again, we've got Mark's details on the screen, and if anybody is looking to have a chat about your options, what else is available, or even just get advice on if you're looking to buy a property and want somebody with experience who is actively helping buyers purchase properties that are, requiring an EWS1 form, this is your guy. So thank you so much. Now on to Shawn, and we're a little bit over time, but that's absolutely fine because, we knew that this was going to go on between kind of 10, 15 minutes each person. And obviously my issue with the slides, so I do apologize. But welcome, Shawn.
Thanks, Dana. Don't worry, I'll try and keep it short and sweet.
You're fine.
So I'm Shawn Wood. I head up the conveyancing department at Watermans Legal. Firstly, thanks to all the speakers for giving up their time tonight. That's really kind of you. It's been a real education to listen to you, and thanks to everyone else for joining us to listen to what we have to say. I'll be giving a brief overview of the cladding issue from the point of view of solicitors when it comes to conveyancing. When selling a property, the key message is be prepared. So it's best, I think Tzana touched on it earlier as well, it's best to have the EWS1 form carried out prior to the property being marketed. And this will prevent delays during the conveyancing process. I coincidentally have a case at the moment where the offer was accepted about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it was only today that the EWS1 form was produced. So that means that the lender hasn't been able to produce loan papers for the purchaser, and we're probably going to see a delay on settlement, probably by about a month. So it can really slow down the whole process if these things aren't organised in advance. Buyers obviously read the home report, and they'll see reference to cladding if it does exist on the building. So it would give buyers or potential buyers confidence, knowing that the relevant checks have been made and that the property has passed the inspection prior to offering. This in turn should technically help to increase the purchase price as well, because it eliminates any doubts that people might have. I've noticed that quite a lot of solicitors now are asking about cladding, even at the point of noting interest on behalf of their clients. They want to know the status of the building. So if we can have the information available, then it really gives a positive message from the outset and should settle any concerns as early as possible. From a buying perspective, buyers are obviously becoming more aware of cladding, with it being in the news and people searching on Google and such like. Buyers are always concerned when they see a 3 in a home report. The thing is, when they see a 3 relating to maybe dampness or a roof report, then they can kind of work out what the issue is and maybe think about the cost to amend that and hopefully bring that down to a 2 or a 1 after they've moved in. When it comes to cladding, they don't really know, because a lot of people don't know, it's still quite new. But when they see the words external wall system may be formed in combustible materials, it probably strikes fear into a lot of people who are looking to buy properties for obvious reasons. And probably one search on Google will terrify them, because Google can do that to people. So having these reports available right at the outset can really alleviate any concerns that they might have at this point. So after a buyer has looked at the home report, they'll then hopefully submit an offer through their solicitor. At this stage, we would expect the offer to be subject to the seller producing the EWS1 form and any other relevant documentation to the satisfaction of them and to their lender. This clause is pretty much a standard clause now that we're seeing in most offers, whether relevant or not, to be honest. It's a good reminder, just to have it in there so that it's never missed. And the reason that clause will be in the offers, it basically ensures that the seller can't conclude the contract without producing the documents to yours and your lender's satisfaction. So once you are satisfied and the lender is happy and issues the loan papers, then at that stage the contract can progress to eventually be concluded, which will bind both parties to a legal contract. In my experience, I think buyers do feel reasonably confident in purchasing where there is a valid EWS1 form. They take comfort in the fact that the lender approves and is willing to obviously take quite a large chunk of the risk. I don't think I've had a buyer withdraw from a purchase after an EWS1 form has been produced, and that should give some comfort to sellers. So the Law Society are our governing body, and we obviously take a lot of guidance from them. And what they are saying is that the report, the EWS1 report, should be in the name, well, is in the name of the seller, but the Law Society want us to try and have this assigned to the purchaser and their lender, if at all possible. The certifier may be unable to extend the duty of care for indemnity reasons and may need to reissue a new EWS1 in favour of the buyer, the lender, at a later date, or certainly at the point of settlement. This is likely to incur a further cost at the seller's end. But I do think there is a bit of confusion here because there doesn't seem to be a uniform approach in the profession right now in terms of whether the duty of care should be assigned across to the purchaser. So I think we'll just have to play that by ear to see how that one pans out. The Law Society also kindly reminded us that we don't hold the technical knowledge to advise on building construction, which is great to hear. We can simply confirm to a client whether or not an EWS1 is in place and covered by indemnity, and we can seek to have the duty of care extended to them and their lender. Any advice that the client requires beyond that should really be sought from the provider of the EWS1. Whether the client goes on to proceed with the purchase should really be a decision for them. Like I say, we are not really allowed to advise on the building point, but obviously we'll advise them on the conveyancing points, what's in the title deeds, etc. So if anything crops up in that they're not satisfied of, obviously there'll be a route out of the contract, but we are limited on what we can advise upon, which is a relief to probably most in the profession. What we can do, we can check that the firm or the individual who has issued the form, the EWS1 form, is a member of a professional body, and that they have the current and adequate PI cover in place. In terms of who pays for the form, it's generally the seller, and I don't think anyone's really tried to pass the cost on to a buyer, as far as I'm aware, and I don't think we will see any of that, to be honest. I know Mark's point about sellers thinking that they should maybe get a little bit more in terms of sale price to cover their costs, and it's obviously an unexpected cost because when they bought the property, cladding probably wouldn't have been a thing. I'll just quickly touch on the purchase process. The first thing is obviously to go out and see properties. That's the main thing. Obviously, due to COVID, it's a little bit more difficult. We don't have open viewings anymore, so everything has to be booked in advance. But on the flip side of that, there's also virtual viewings and lots of videos which can help view properties from afar. If you do go to a viewing, or even if you book an appointment online to view a property, this is an opportunity to ask about if there is any EWS1 form available. If you do like the property, then what to do next is to contact your solicitor, who can act on your behalf to note interest, and then hopefully to then submit a formal offer. If cladding is mentioned in the home report, or if the building is a non-traditional construction, or if it's above commercial properties, then this is probably the right time to contact your mortgage broker, just to double check that your preferred lender is willing to grant a mortgage of that type of property. And if they give you the green light, then that will give you the confidence to submit an offer, knowing that it should be plain sailing afterwards. The Edinburgh market is very buoyant at the moment. Most properties are going to closing dates. And a closing date is basically where the sellers manage to generate quite a large number of interest, and then they give all interested parties a deadline to submit their best offer. You do only get one shot at a closing date. You have no idea what anyone else will put forward as an offer, which just generally pushes up the price. So it's really the seller's dream to get a closing date, and we're seeing quite a lot of them at the moment, which obviously pushes up the price, and it's very difficult to buy a property below valuation, or even sometimes at valuation at the moment. There's a number of schemes available to help people who are first-time buyers. So there's the First Home Fund that's available and goes live again on the 1st of April for applications. And there's Lift Scheme as well. And to be honest, we could talk all night about what these schemes do and how to apply for them. But I suppose that the basic point is that you can get government money up to £25,000 to help you towards your first purchase. The funding, I think it's only 60 million this year, which is quite a reduced level from last year. So the money is expected to run out quite quickly. We are holding a first-time buyers event next month. So that's a little plug for Tzana there. She'll be happy that I mentioned that. And we'll go into these points in a bit more detail at the next event. But yeah, the property market is good. Cladding is obviously a concern, but there is a lot of confidence in the market. So if people are thinking of selling, it is still a good time. And I hopefully I've touched on some relevant points there that you'll take away with you. But any questions, you can reach me on the phone number on the screen there, or contact me by email at any time. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Shawn. I appreciate it. So while we've all been talking, again, we will send out the slides. We've got obviously these useful links and areas that we can go to. We'll now kind of pick up in terms of the Q&A. I've been pulling over, I know, again, we've gone over a little bit in time, and I've been pulling over some of the more commonly asked questions. So if you guys, when I do ask you the questions, if you wouldn't mind just pulling yourselves off of mute, because I hopefully have one for everyone. There's been a lot of people, and I think, Paul, maybe I'll pick up with you first. There have been a lot of people on that are asking questions, specifically talking about intrusive surveys. I know that I had picked up on one of your points that was specifically mentioning about how here in Scotland it is, you said visual surveys first, and would it be the case that you guys are just going gung-ho to kind of drill into walls? Would you mind giving a bit more information about the scope of the EWS1 surveys, and really, again, probably why you're not just drilling away?
Okay, well, first of all, the external walls of a multi-occupied building belong to the collective owners. So before a destructive assessment is conducted, it really would require the authority of the factor, either with or without the consent of the majority or all of the collective owners. Now, what we do is, it's not a standoff visual inspection, but it isn't a destructive assessment. So to find out what's within the internal walls, we've got, and what cladding panels are made of, we've got metal detecting equipment, and we've also got little endoscopes, 5mm endoscopes with cameras that we can put in holes, voids and gaps within wall structures to see, to take photographs, to convince ourselves and get evidence of what's there. So it's very much an evidential assessment. Having got back to several owners and several developments to say that it would need a destructive assessment, several owners have offered to drill into the walls within their flats so that they could identify what's behind the plasterboard and what's within the wall cavity. And for me, that's been quite successful on a number of occasions where buildings have been completely written off, some in Glasgow and some in Edinburgh. On one occasion, a retired architect in a top floor flat was able to take away, when I arrived, he'd actually cut the plasterboard away to expose mineral wool within the walls. So those walls were within his flat, and it wasn't an intrusive destruction, if you like, of the main external walls, and it certainly wasn't from the outside.
Perfect. No worries, thank you. Another one was, Mark, it was picked up in terms of a question was asked about buying new build properties. So if you're buying a new build that's never actually advertised for sale in the open market, and there obviously is no home report survey prepared where the surveyor identifies that an EWS1 form would be needed, are EWS1 forms needed? Or I guess in your experience, have you recently purchased new build properties direct from the builders where it's been required to have EWS1 form?
I think on that basis, the lender will obviously undertake their own mortgage valuation and appoint, they've got their own valuation panels. Sometimes they even get paneled out to Jamie Shepherd, etc. I think at that point the surveyor would obviously raise a concern. I think there's not been a huge experience of that, but as far as I know from one lender's perspective, that they will actually put it on the as a condition of the mortgage offer, that the conveyancer then has to check that the with regards to the fire safety, which I can't quite understand, and I'm not sure how that would work. But a lot will be driven by the mortgage valuation that's carried out. So although there's no home report that immediately identifies an issue, it doesn't mean to say that there isn't an issue. I'm not sure from a builder's perspective now. Maybe Mike or Paul would be better served to answer this, but I don't know if the materials etc. that are being used for modern construction have been adapted as a consequence of what's going on. But again, perhaps that's a question for Mike or Paul to answer on that.
Perfect. Okay, thanks. There was another one that was for Mike. You may not want to answer this. Obviously, it's picked up and it's been mentioned a number of times that the lenders rely specifically on the surveyor's comments for both on the home report and also that they rely on your comments about the EWS1 form. We appreciate that obviously most surveyors won't comment on the EWS1 form. Why is this?
It's the RICS have given us that guidance, so we're not supposed to comment upon the EWS1 form. And as I said earlier, the lenders will either accept it or not accept it. So when we get, if we've carried out a home report and the EWS1 form has been obtained retrospectively, after we've been there, we'll get sent what's called a PDQ by the lender, and it will be basically saying, here's the EWS1 form. But when we get sent that, the lender has accepted it already. So there's basically different lenders have different phraseology. So we will amend the report accordingly, saying that the EWS1 form has been accepted by the lender. I mean, generally, as I said, we're not supposed to comment upon them, but A1s, A2s, and B1s are what the lenders are lending on. Just to answer the last question, actually, about the new build thing. The building regs changed in, I think it was end of 2018. So a new build shouldn't need one, because the regs say that no combustible materials should be used in building a new build. So in theory, no, it shouldn't need it. But I do know that the EWS1 guys have been out to new build developments, because some of the issues may be that they might have actually been through planning prior to the new regs changing. So sometimes they might, sometimes they might not, depending on when they went through planning. There's two questions in one. There you go.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. That was awesome. Okay, Shawn, there was another question, and I don't know what a can of worms we'll be opening with this. Somebody has asked if you have seen, or do we expect to see from a conveyancing perspective for buyers, that buyers or the buyer solicitors within the negotiations or as part of the missives will be asking for retention being held back because of cladding or an EWS1 form?
No, never come across that, to be honest. I think once the report's issued and accepted by the purchaser, the lender, then it seems to draw a line under it at that point, to be honest. We tend to keep retentions for maybe ongoing repairs to a tenement block roof, or for something that wasn't quite ready or organised at the time of settlement. We'll hold back retention for that type of thing. But generally, it's kind of a clean break at the point of settlement when it comes to EWS1.
Perfect. Okay, this is more for, I guess, Mike or Paul. I think, Mike, you had first mentioned that there are 3 firms that can issue. I don't know if you were kind of referencing whether it's the B1 specific kind of that kind of CNG, or you'd kind of referenced the 3 firms to issue. What is it you were actually kind of, what are the 3 firms and what is it that they're issuing? Is it EWS1 forms here in kind of the Greater Scotland area, or is it the B1 ratings, or?
It was just generally the EWS1 form in itself. As Paul mentioned, the Institution of Fire Engineers changed their guidance in mid-December, and that's what Paul was mentioning about the CEng qualification. So now I was just mentioning the 3 firms that could actually carry out EWS1 forms.
Perfect.
The lenders accept.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. And then there was another one, and I think this is probably going to be more for Paul. It was more, and I guess we probably already also know the answer. Why is it that it's required, like as you say, CEng, which I'm taking into the assumption that it is a shortened terminology for chartered engineer? Why is it that it's now required to have a chartered engineer for a B1 or a B2? What is it in terms, I guess, specifying their qualifications, or what is it they're doing that lenders want to see on their report? And would it be the case that the chartered engineer would need to issue a EWS1 form, like homeowner would commission it from them, and if they had the qualifications to sign off the EWS1 form that said B1, here's my qualifications, my cert, my name, and I'm a chartered engineer, would that likely pass? Or is it that the chartered engineer needs to do an entirely different survey thereafter?
Okay, first of all, to be able to sign an EWS1 form, as released by RICS in 16 December 2019, the person completing the form should be a member at M level of a building related institution. So it could be Institute of Fire Engineers, it could be a chartered surveyor, it could be someone within architects, etc., etc. There is a full list available on the RICS website. And on the 3rd of December, when the decision was changed, my understanding is it was changed because the Institution of Fire Engineers, which is the main fire engineering institution for the whole planet, released something to UK Finance or to RICS that it was their opinion that it should be chartered engineers who were getting involved in buildings that were fitting into the option B rating. So option B is where there are mainly combustibles in the external walls. So, and that would include Grenfell's type buildings with ACM on them, buildings wrapped in high pressure laminate, buildings wrapped in polystyrene, etc., etc. And I really can't make any more comment on that because it came from the IFE.
No problem. That's great. Thank you so much. I think I'm just going to finish up because I know obviously we're coming up to an hour and a half. So I appreciate everybody who has stuck with us this entire time, and also obviously for everybody giving up their Thursday night. So we'll do 2 more questions and then we'll kind of wrap things up. This is, I guess, more for, this will be kind of Shawn or Paul really picking up on this, and I can probably even give some sort of insight. A couple of times people have asked, obviously, if the EWS1 form is being encouraged by the Law Society to be extended over to the purchasers and or their lenders, who pays for that? So, I mean, Shawn, have you come across this, that it's being asked to be obviously attributed to in the name of the buyer, and who covered that cost in those instances that you've had it?
To be honest, it's quite rare. I've not come across it too much, but the Law Society guidance is clear that they would prefer to see the duty of care extended to the purchaser and the lender. I think I dealt with one, did we sell one last week, in fact, and it remained in the name of the seller. If it was to be transferred into the purchaser's name, then the expense should really fall in line with the seller, in my view. And that's what happened, the occasional time I have come across it. But it probably doesn't happen as much as it should. Maybe Paul can add a bit more to that.
Sure. I think EWS1 was really developed with the English housing tenure in mind, where there's one single building owner. That person would commission EWS1, and in Scotland it's worked out rather differently because each individual flat owner actually owns a flat, whereas in England they lease them. So when the EWS1 was commissioned, it was always considered it would be the property owner who would commission it. So that single owner, for example, south of the border, would be have an EWS1, they would commission it. They would then transfer some of the costs between the leaseholders who are in that building. But then when there's a purchaser, I can't really comment on how that works in England, south of the border. But in Scotland, the Law Society of Scotland issued some advice and guidance last year to solicitors, and solicitors are acting in the best interest of their client when it's a purchaser. So I can understand that it would be advisable for the documentation to be in the buyer's name, because it will be the buyer who owns the property after they've bought it, and they would need that EWS1 to be in their name to apply for any fixed rate mortgage deals or home improvement loans, or to effectively sell the property within that 5-year term. So whilst it's good legal advice, and whilst it would be good legal advice to any of us if our solicitor said we would recommend it was in your name, when it comes to our company PI insurance and other PI insurers, they will not extend that insurance to anyone other than our company paying client. So assignation, which effectively means duty of care or transfer to the purchaser, is an idealistic thing to have, but for insurers, they will not provide that cover to any other third party. So our company has got around that effectively by coming up with standard statements and paragraphs that we've been sending out to solicitors and other agents, and effectively saying, yeah, there is a value to an EWS1, and if the purchaser requires it to get access to finance and sell it within that period, we can do that as long as they're a paying client of ours, and therefore there's no need for assignation, because when they're a paying client of ours, they are covered by our PI insurance.
Oh, thanks, Paul. I think I could actually attest to that, because I've had experience where I've dealt with property sellers, and later on down the line, just before missives are due to be completed and before the buyers are due to get their offer of loan, it's been raised that the lender wants the EWS1 form in the name of the buyer. In that instance, I usually, when I started realizing that this was the case, if I've ever gone out to homeowners' properties to do evaluation, I flagged up that this isn't always the request, but this has been requested at some points. And in that instance, it would be that a second EWS1 form would need to be commissioned, and it would be commissioned in the name of the buyer. And I've had sometimes that the buyer has covered that cost themselves, and I've had other instances where the seller has just said, I'm ready to get sold, I'm ready to complete if I need to actually cover a cost. And again, the costs are listed on our slides, which we'll send out, but it's anywhere between, I think, Paul, you said it was like 525 or 575 plus VAT per dwelling, up to £3,500 plus VAT per dwelling. So I've seen both instances where a buyer covers it themselves, and also a seller has covered it just to actually push the deal over the line. And then just one final, sorry, go.
Sorry, if you don't mind, those costs that are in there, the top costs are not from our company.
Yes.
What they're highlighting is the costs that some people in Scotland may have to pay if they go to different companies.
Yeah, it's just an overall, that was, very good. Thanks for pointing that out. It's just an overall kind of assessment of what you can see within the market of the costings that some firms do charge. The very last question we'll ask, and we'll touch base with you, Mark, because I'm very interested, and I think it's just because it's always like this mysterious what's going to happen. You've obviously picked up that there's one lender, one high street lender, that does not accept EWS1 forms. That's obviously been noted as Santander. So I think if anything that I'm walking away from this, it would be when I'm dealing with property sales and I'm selling a property that has an EWS1 form, I'm pre-qualifying a buyer when they're getting in touch to say, oh, who's your decision agreement in principle with? And if they mention Santander, I'll be like, oh, let's have a chat. And I think part of that, have you had Santander accept approve a mortgage or issue the offer of loan for a building with an EWS1 form that had the management agent issue a letter? Or has it just been, listen, they've kind of said full stop and management agencies aren't really willing to issue that?
No, I think it'd be remiss to sort of suggest that Santander were sort of doing something wrong, because it actually works both ways. I mean, if there is an EWS1 form in place and someone has gone, and got that, then the management company can quite comfortably answer the relevant questions. So it doesn't present a problem. It also wouldn't present a problem if for some reason the management company took it upon themselves to answer the questions regarding the fire safety. Now, how comfortable would they feel doing that? It's not for me to say, but I have had, I mean, just recently, this last week, we did have a mortgage approved for someone, and the management company were happy to put pen to paper, probably in the knowledge that they did have an EWS1 form. So I think, don't totally discount one lender because of what they do. I don't quite understand the thought process behind it, if I'm being perfectly honest. I mean, there must be some sort of rationale from credit risk or whatever. I think the rationale might be that probably the likelihood is that these properties have got EWS1 forms anyway, but that's only in the purchase side. On the remortgage side, I'm not too sure how all that would work, but certainly people should keep an open mind when it comes to lending, because there's other factors to take into account, like affordability, things like that. So you can't just rule one lender out because they have something different to someone else. And who's to say that they're wrong? They might not be wrong. You just don't know.
When you've mentioned managing agent, are you specifically talking about a factor, or would it be?
Yeah, so it's the experience that we've had recently. It was the factor that they were quite happy to draft a letter answering the relevant questions. So so it would be the factor, and the factor happy to do that, then fair enough. It doesn't cause an issue. I think the bottom line is that Santander just don't want to see EWS1 form. They're not interested in them at all, and if you send them in, they won't look at them. So that's one lender's perspective, and as I said, who's to say that they're right or wrong? Don't know.
Well, listen, guys, thank you so much. It's now coming up to 7:45. So we really appreciate everybody's time. And